you call yourself a professional wingman, if I understand, right?
Yes.
And actually, before I ask the question, why don't you just give like real quick, tell us like a little bit of your background and like how you ended up becoming a professional wingman.
Yeah. So,
What does that mean?
I started the Professional Wingman over 15 years ago. So back in 2009, I was still in a place where I wanted to know what I wanted to do for a career or business. One thing I knew I loved was personal development. And I loved helping people become better. One of the common things that people came to me for advice on was with not just women, but how do you build a life that's enjoyable and fun? People saw me, going out and enjoying meeting strangers or going on these adventures, and they just kept asking me, Thomas, how were you able to do that? And so I would give them advice, and they would go and they would do it, and they start to see success themselves. One key component that was common when people came to me was around how do I communicate with women? And that's really what it was. People wanted to learn how to be a better communicator, and then they wanted to leverage that to date more high quality women. So one day I was at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. This was 2009. And I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And a friend of mine saw a really attractive woman and wanted me to introduce them. Yeah, he literally asked me to be his wingman and introduce him to her so they can connect. And so I did that. And they ended up going on a lunch date the next day. And he ended up paying for my drinks and meals the whole weekend as a thank you. And I thought, man, I bet it'd be really cool to be someone else's wingman. And I love the idea of going pro, like an athlete. So that's when the Professional Wingman was born. And the whole premise was to help people, predominantly men, but I did work with a lot of women, on developing their social skills so they can go out and find that long-term committed relationship, find that love that they were looking for. And so I would go out and give them real-time feedback on what prevented them from making those connections happen. And it was beautiful. I loved it. And I was really good at it. Over 15 years, 400 plus marriages and engagements, plenty of kids around, currently 0 divorces.
These are all yours?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Might be responsible for quite a few. Who knows? Yeah. And, the big number that I started to really pay attention to was the 0, the divorces. I have clients who've been married for 10 years now, and they're still together. So I started to see some common threads around communication, around confidence, around lifestyle optimization, around holistic development. Because it wasn't just about the women that these guys were coming to me for. It was about how do I embody being enough and then present myself in such a way that attracts the kind of woman I want in my life? And how do I create a lifestyle that's conducive to meeting and attracting those type of women? So over time, I had my own kind of, dark night of the soul, and we can always get into that. But it then ended up me, kind of showing up on the other side, realizing that this concept doesn't just revolve around women. This revolves around any area of life where a man wants to be better. There's a part of them that fears this idea around failure, around not being good enough, about the constant pressure to perform and what comes with the responsibility if you do perform, and can you sustain it, right? We all have this internal talk. And I just realized, being a dad and having a soon to be 7-year-old and seeing the scope of the world as I see it now, I felt like my legacy, my opportunity to create a legacy would be in the future leaders of this world. If I were to go on and die, which will happen eventually, I want my daughter to live in a world where there are powerful masculine leaders that can keep things in order and allow her to go off and live the life that she's meant to live. And so the way for me to do that is to find these guys or call these guys and empower them to overcome this imposter syndrome so they can go out and lead extraordinary lives that's filled with impact, purpose, fulfillment, but most importantly, joy. To be able to enjoy the whole process of it all unfolding, the growth, the pain, the success, the failure, all of it, and treat life like a game and play to win.
Yeah, that's great. I, my personal history when I was 24, That's when I got kind of introduced to some life-changing material around that
Mhm.
same subject. It was the whole double your dating, Evan Pagan era,
David D'Angelo,
and
formerly known
it was
as.
before it was before the word like pickup came around or pickup artist or anything like that. I never associated myself really with that, but I did real like it was really about it, it's women really serve as amazing mirrors in my opinion. Kind of get your thought on this, like when you're coaching guys, because I noticed that like it was funny whenever I first entered that world. You don't feel like you're like you don't even realize that you don't feel like you're enough, but it shows up in the form of fear and the stories that you tell yourself as to why she's not going to like me, or I don't have enough money, or I'm not tall enough, or you pick whatever litany of endless reasons that you want. You find these kind of excuses, and they're really just the product of fear. And it's so funny, like it's the hardest thing to believe is that having absolute belief in yourself, as evidenced by your willingness to act on that, is one of the most attractive and seductive things that you can possibly embody as a human being, and especially as a man. And women are literally wired, in my opinion, they're wired and designed to respond to that, to cheerlead that, and to reject you when you don't accept that within yourself. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree on so many levels. I feel like, guys, because men may not feel like they're good enough, then it creates this second deep fear, which is if I'm not good enough, then I can't be loved.
Mm-hmm.
And that drives men crazy, right? They will go
Yeah.
to the ends of the earth to figure out how they can solve that fear, because that's what they believe will make them whole. And when we go out and we try to learn how to communicate with women, I too never came from the pickup community. In fact, I was late to even knowing its existence after the professional wingman started to take off. But underneath the canned openers and the terminology and the game, so to speak, was this psychological concept of what happens when you are courageous and you just
Mm-hmm.
go for it and you shoot your shot, right? In a sea of men who aren't willing to do that, the very
Mm-hmm.
few who are willing to, they're the ones that get the spoils. Doesn't mean that they get it and they keep it, but for that moment, they're the ones that are seen as the winners. And it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
take a lot. It just takes that courage. And like what you said, the core belief is that it's possible. Like when I think about the cycle of how confidence is built, I always start by saying confidence isn't necessary to do something. It's the result of doing something. So if you don't need confidence to do something, well, what do you really need? Well, I dissected it myself and I saw that it really actually starts with faith. Faith in either yourself, the process, a higher
Mm-hmm.
power, a support system, whatever it is, that is where
Mm-hmm.
it starts. And with faith then comes courage. And then with courage comes then action, right? And then through that process, then you can get the feedback that will ultimately lead to either an increase in confidence or a decrease in confidence, right? And that's judged by your thoughts and your feelings. But
Yeah.
guys who believe in themselves and have the faith
Yeah.
is a great starting point.